Hi everyone, it's your boy Zach, and this is my video about what's wrong with The Bear, the Hulu TV show. I love this show. It was actually absolutely amazing. The only real problem was the title, which didn't really fit it at all until the end, and it still didn't. So The Bear is about a guy whose name is Chef Cousin Carmen or Carmy. I don't know. It's a little weird. Usually in a show, they're going to try and pick, like, this is what we call this guy, but everyone calls him different things at different times. In, like, the last episode, he's, like, at an Al Anon meeting, and he's like, hi, my name is Carmen. I'm like, is that a fake name? Is that actually your name? Like, they mention his last name, which is, like, Bearzaggio or something like that. Some kind of Italian, it has the word bear in there, but it's just a little bit off. Like, it's called The Bear. They show a bear in a cage on one of the many downtown bridges in Chicago in, like, the first scene, and then you see the bear like 8 episodes later. Anyway, so The Bear is about a guy who is named Chef, and he's from Chicago, but he's been gone for a few years, working, I believe, mostly in New York City, and he's working at, like, the top restaurants. He's at a very high level, and then his brother kills himself, so he goes back to Chicago and he takes over the family business. Now, this might sound, I know the suicide, but, like, the guy moves from the big city back home to work with the yokels. Like, that's like a sitcom premise that has been done a million times. And this show is excellent for multiple reasons. Number one, no romance. No romance. You got men and women at work, and that's it. They're working, they're making food, they're cleaning. There's a lot of cleaning. I used to work in restaurants a lot, a lot of different, mostly fast food. And this is like a cut above fast food. It's kind of like a family-owned diner, local eatery type of situation. So Carmy, the chef, he moves back and he starts to treat kind of a rundown diner, essentially, like a real restaurant where they will be formal with each other. They will call each other chef. They will have fairly strict rules. They will have a hierarchy, like in a French, what do you call it? French restaurant. And everything you think like this show is going to be, it doesn't, yes, there are people who, a strict leader comes in and he kind of changes things up and they're angry, but then they learn that it works. But when it happens, it's just kind of subtle. Like, they kind of fight against it the first couple of episodes, and then they kind of won't really mention having an issue with it. And then, like, 4 episodes later, somebody will be like, I really like how things are. Like, he improved things. What I'm trying to say is there used to be this thing with, like, Seinfeld where they were like, no hugging, no learning. And even shows like Smallville, they give themselves, rules. It's like, we're never going to see him in the Superman uniform until, like, the very last scene in the last episode. But it almost feels like they did a bunch of rules like that. They're like, okay, so it's going to be a workplace. It's actually billed as a comedy. I don't know. It's amusing sometimes, but it's not really a comedy. I don't know what I'd call it. But when you go to Hulu, it says, like, 9 episodes, comedy. So the main conflict is that it's actually really intense working in this kitchen. And the main guy, Carmy, he's a little mixed up in the head. He seems like a guy who's always been pretty high-strung, and now he's coming back and he's running a place that isn't his typical type of place to work out. His brother actually kind of like shut him out, wouldn't talk to him the last few years. And the main thing I want to say about this is absolutely recommend. It is pretty much what you think it's going to be. It's like a modern age drama, but there's a lot of things that are kind of old-fashioned. There's a lot of, like, old-fashioned stuff about, like, let's work and let's communicate. But then they do a new thing where they never hammer it home. There's just basic stuff about, like, hey, if you're walking behind someone, announce that you're behind them so you don't bump into them, they don't spill hot soup all over themselves and everything. There's several parts where people are, quote, shitty. and somebody will mess something up and then blame someone else and then find out that they did it and then just not tell anyone. It's not one of those shows where you're supposed to say like, oh, this is the good guy and this is the bad guy. It's like one of the characters is like a straight up gangster, but he's just presented as I forget if he was an uncle or if he was an actual family friend, but it's like, hey, it's our uncle who is kind of extorting us, but also he'll let us work it off the debt very slowly. It's set in Chicago. I do not believe it's filmed entirely in Chicago, but it's set there, and it does seem very authentic, with one glaring example. So it's a restaurant in downtown Chicago, so they got a mix of white, Hispanic, black. There's 3 black guys on the cast. And this usually is a good thing, because when you just have one black guy, then that black guy has to represent all black guys, so they make him extremely bland, or he's just amazing and great at everything. These are like the 3 most passive black guys I've ever seen, ever. At one point in an early episode, Carmy, the main character, he like goes around a corner and he just slams into this like old ass black dude, not from Chicago, but living in Chicago. And then he yells at him like, oh shit, no, that's not. And it was like, get the fuck out of the way. It was like one of those type of situations. It's like, yo, no, like it's still like a 55-year-old black guy in Chicago. Like it's not just going to be like a little sour face. And then it is. And all 3 of the black guys are like extremely passive. This is balanced out by a black female lead, basically the number 3 lead. And she's written quite well, because there tends to be the situation right now where the black women are all like soulful saints. She is good at a lot of things, but you also realize that number 1, she's kind of a troublemaker, and number 2, she's not there. She's obviously there as a transition to go to someplace else, so she's using it as a stepping stone, and she's burned a lot of bridges. Her and the main character of the chef are very similar in a lot of ways. I don't think the chef is supposed to be that old. I think he's supposed to be like late 20s. The other main character is, I'll call him cousin. I don't remember his name. He's Eben something, Mossback something. I know him from Girls. Apparently he was Microchip in the Punisher show that I never finished. He is really, really, really good. One of the things I was kind of surprised by is sometimes I think an actor is more of a huge deal than they actually are. Like for some reason I got it into my head that Charlton Copley was like this huge star. And then I went to check his IMDb and he just kind of does whatever. He was in a really, really great movie about Ted Bundy. I believe it's just called Ted. But I was like, man, he's so good in everything I see him in. It's like, wait, I see him in like one movie every 10 years. But this Eben Mossback something, I don't know. He's great. I went to go check his IMDb. He's been doing stuff for 20 years. He's actually in his mid-40s. In my mind, he's more of a huge deal than I guess he is in Hollywood. So it kind of explains why he's in his mid-40s and he's like the second lead in a Hulu TV show. The main character, who I never even bothered learning his name as an actor because to me he is so much that character, is just fantastic. I kept thinking about the 1970s, the really intense Dustin Hoffman, Robert De Niro. He definitely is in that mode where he's like, he's just intense. He's an intense actor playing an intense guy, and it's absolutely riveting. And again, it's not this situation where you're supposed to be like, oh, he's the good guy or he's the troubled loner. Like, he's a good guy. He's an asshole. He's troubled. At one point, he's, talking about like, he never had a girlfriend in high school. He's a very, very rich character. So at the end, I'm not going to spoil it, but everything kind of works very well. One thing I loved about this show is there is one episode, I think it's like the second to last. It's like 19 minutes. Now, it's a really great episode, but they never do this thing where it's like, oh, every episode has to be 35, 48, 56 minutes, whatever. The last one, like the last episode, I think is like 48 minutes, and it feels like it's a movie. Every episode is a different length depending on what it needs to be, and there's absolutely no fat in this at all. There are some things that didn't work out to me that great, like the three black guys all being completely passive was weird to me. You know, Chicago is a majority black town, so to have something set in downtown Chicago with three black guys as characters and none of them, I wouldn't say they wouldn't have a black bone. They don't have a black bone. They don't have a backbone, but they're all very passive. Is that there is some? You can tell that there is some. It's scripted, but there's some ad-libbing in there, and the ad-libbing to me is really obviously different than the written parts. I don't think it works out that well. Although there is one scene that's really great. It's the guy who plays the Punisher. I forget his name. He's the brother that killed himself. It's a flashback, and they're kind of doing. You see it in indie movies all the time, like somebody telling like a blue collar guy telling a story, and everyone's kind of joining in, and you can tell a lot of it's ad libbed. And that part, I was like, I can tell this part is ad libbed, and they're kind of playing it like it's a huge deal, but it's not. But then you cut to the modern day, and Eben, what's his name, is on a date, and you realize that he's telling this story, and that to him this was a great time, and he's on a date with like a normie woman, and all she takes from it was that him and his brother were drinking really early in the morning. You can tell that's a deal breaker for her on this date. And so it was a really great contrast between there's also like this fat guy, like comic relief character who he just says like, dude, and it's like, it's really lame. But overall, it's a fantastic show. Probably one of the best shows I've seen in a while. I was talking about how, talking with a friend who's into comics, he's like, 20 years ago, every comic movie, every comic TV show, I would read everything about it. I would watch it. It would be huge to me. He goes, now I don't even see. He says he doesn't even watch these things. It's the same for me. There's all these comic TV shows and movies. I don't even care. A Hulu show about a diner becoming slightly better than a diner. Absolutely my favorite show of at least the last year, maybe the last few years. So go check it out. It's called The Bear on Hulu. It's only 9 episodes, and a lot of them are really short. If you binge shows, you can easily binge this in a weekend. Easily. Anyway, thanks for watching. Bye.